I'm joined now by Canopy River's CEO, Narbé Alexandrian. Narbé, welcome back.
Thanks for having me again.
You bet. Narbé, in this downturn in the cannabis space, there's a lot of doom and gloom, but cooler minds need to prevail. And I'm assuming that you're still all in on the cannabis space in Canopy Rivers.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're cool as a cucumber, as they say it. We really believe that this is still one of the most revolutionary times in our life where we see a product come into play, an ingredient, which is cannabis, come into play in the consumer packaged goods industry and just take over all over the world.
Sure. With the revaluation in cannabis, which is, in my view, just a natural part of an emerging asset class that has seen extreme interest, there's a lot of people who characterize it as over. And I think that puts such thinking, or those who think such, at risk of missing out on a lot of the upside that is apparent in the vast array of compounds and products and innovations that are going to come from cannabis because it is an emerging industry. So in this environment, what do you look at as more viable and attractive and of interest for right now versus waiting on the long-term growth of a more consumer packaged goods oriented industry?
Yeah, I mean, if we were to take a step back, what was happening prior to legalization was a bit of speculation. Everyone looked at who is developing how many square feet of cultivation space. And I like to use John Maynard Keynes as an example. John Maynard Keynes is the economist who got America and Canada and the UK out of the Great Depression in the 1930s. And he coined a term called animal spirits, which was you hear about one of your friends or peers in a speculative market going and buying something, they're making a lot of profit off of it without doing a lot of homework behind the back. You're actually going and just investing in that. So you heard that so-and-so LP tripled in 6 months. You just jump into that thinking that you're going to triple again. And the market, as we approach legalization, turned from being all about voting mechanism, which was who's the most popular, to becoming a weighing mechanism to show that who's actually showing the results at the till. So what we found over time was that when you look at the different cultivators, it's not about how much square footage you had, it's about what the quality of the greenhouse was and where it's located and who the operators were and what kind of cost advantage would you get and what kind of yield advantage would you get and how can you compete against a market where there's more and more hemp and cannabis cultivation taking place all over the world that's really driving down the cost. So that's where we're in right now. We're trying to see who is it that actually has substance and fundamentals behind it. And this is why we're so keen on hearing about earnings and what companies were just promotional companies at that point in time that don't have any substance behind it as well.
Mm-hmm. So then would you categorize any of the larger LPs as at risk of at an existential risk as a result of the weakness in the market at this point?
I would say that I don't think there's any existential risk. I do think there's a risk of right sizing in the thought process of being that a lot of these large LPs have a huge backing of retail investors that believe in it and have valued it at a higher multiple than many of the other players you see in the space. Why I don't think it's existential is because these players have huge assets all around the world that they can utilize and they can capture new markets. I firmly do believe that when we look at profitability, we're causing harm to ourselves because what we're doing is taking a conservative approach to how we see the industry. Mm-hmm. This is a greenfield opportunity. In Canada alone, legalized market, it's a 12% increase month over month for cannabis sales. That's a 284% annualized rate of growth. We're only in the first inning of the game here. So if we sell ourselves short with profitability, we're giving away a piece of our profit to the government for taxes when we could be taking that and redeploying it in new markets and growing the asset more and more.
Mm-hmm. Drake recently announced a partnership with Canopy Growth wherein they're going to collaborate on a product line built around Drake and his name. To me, that seemed like it should be a catalyst and a bit of a wake-up call that, this is an industry that integrates well with many other existing industries. And so I keep looking for something like that to happen and cause a reversal generally across the sector. Even in the case of Canopy's own shares, there wasn't the kind of enthusiasm expressed in the share price performance as you would have expected with such a big announcement. Do you think that the audience has become just so tone deaf because they're all focused on the decline in prices that it doesn't matter what they hear right now, it's all just bad news?
I mean, could it be like the Trump effect where there's big news all the time and nothing's really affecting everyone because we're just so desensitized to it? I do believe that the Drake deal was a huge deal. Drake is the #1 rapper at this point in time, and he has a huge influence with a demographic that is keen on using cannabis for recreational or adult use. So I do think it was a very valuable partnership to be made there. But again, I think the focus now from investor base is how does this improve the till, the results on the till, and not necessarily how does this improve the marketing efforts of the company. Will this sell more cannabis? Will more people buy it? And we won't know that until it's actually in play.
Mm-hmm. We don't really hear much from the Snoop Dogg Leafs by Snoop sort of franchise in terms of a broken out from the rest of the products sort of discussion that goes on. Do you know why that is?
No, I wouldn't have any details on that, no.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we know that the musicians coming into the space and the entertainers and the celebrity effect is obviously building more visibility around and the cannabis industry and lending sort of more of a legitimacy to it, if you will, because people's cultural heroes start using a product, typically their audience does too. Do you see a situation where, what's happening in the stock market doesn't really have any bearing on what's happening at the till, as you say, but it is the action at the till that will ultimately drive the stock market's reversal in time?
I think in time you'll see both of them come back together. Again, I think what we really need to prove to the investor body is these are the sets of companies that you should focus on because these are the ones that are going to continuously show the growth. And there's another set of companies which we used to believe in, but something is wrong with the business model, or maybe they screwed up the capital structure and took too much debt, and now they're drowning in debt. They can't service that debt. And this will all play out in the next few months, in my opinion, where we see some of these converts come into action. Companies can't pay them. They have to go into other means. Mm-hmm. But I do believe the celebrity effect is strong. So an example I love to give is in the sports industry. And there's a new study that was pushed out about a month ago in Nature magazine about the effects of athletes and cannabis. Have you heard that one?
I've heard a few different things from athletes in cannabis, but not that particular one. No.
So they did a survey, and they found that 30% of amateur and professional athletes say they use cannabis, CBD or THC before or after some type of a performance. A lot of it was anonymized, so we don't know who these athletes are, but it seemed pretty promising. So at the same time, what they did was they did a study on the runner's high. So as you know, the runner's high is you go out for a run, 3 kilometers or a couple of miles, and you come back and you have this sense of euphoria in you. And scientists have always thought this was a mystery because they couldn't peg what it was. Your hormonal system does show an increase in endorphins when you do come back. So they thought that as you run and you exert energy, your endorphin levels increase and the neurotransmitters that push that hormone actually make you happier. Mm-hmm. So what they did is they sent out 70 individuals for a run. This was a double-blind study. So 35 of those individuals that were going for a run were given an endorphin-blocking drug. Another 35 were given a placebo. And the experimenters themselves, it's double-blind, so they don't know who they gave what to, so they can't dictate how they talk through it or anything like that. They went for a run, they come back, and everyone shows a similar amount of euphoria. Yet one has an endorphin-blocking drug, so no increase in endorphins. The other one, the placebo, does have that. So now scientists believe that the endocannabinoid system is actually the result, the culprit around what gives you the runner's high, which gives it a nice tone because there's the word high in runner's high, and
right.
And we're talking about cannabis. So THC and CBD bind to the endocannabinoid system. This is a huge market which nobody has really tapped into in the Canadian market nor in the U.S. market, and I believe that what we're going to see over the next little while is cannabis companies are going to, using data, are going to start creating niches of products. So products meant for certain demographics or psychographics and different groups of people. And they're going to be focused on talking to those groups of people in a certain way. And that's what I think really differentiates the Canadian brands to what the California brands are doing because of how competitive California is.
Sure. The weakness in capital markets has probably changed the dynamic in funding private companies, which is a large part of what you do. What has changed in the private company universe in cannabis?
If you brought me in about a month ago, I would have said nothing. I would have said a lot of the private market participants would have said that they thought the public markets were just a summer fling, and that would go away. But now that we're seeing there's a more prolonged effect to how the markets are treating cannabis companies, you're seeing a right sizing and a reconciliation of the multiples between the public and the private markets. We like to internally call it a bit of a Boxing Day or Black Friday effect, because you talk to a company and their $30 million valuation, you tell them that there's no way they can raise that in this type of an industry. 2 weeks later, they come back to you and their $15 million valuation, 50% off. It's Black Friday.
Right.
So you are seeing that repricing of a lot of businesses that we've been checking out. And what I like about our situation at Canopy Rivers is we have about $80 million of cash on hand. So we're ripe for investment, and we're just waiting for the opportunities that we've been following for a year now, right-size their valuations, and it's a great entry point for any investor.
Right. Okay, Narbé, that's a great update as per usual. We'll keep the home fires burning, as they say, and come back to you soon. Thanks for joining me today.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.